Welcome back to the channel. In this video I wanted to share a few ways that mid-side EQ can enhance your productions, mixes or masters. Now it is a good idea to have a good understanding of EQ and balance to really get the most out of this video, but if you have a pair of headphones or studio monitors, you should be able to hear the difference in these examples, and it should help you no matter what your ability level is. So let's get right into it. I'll be using these two EQs for the audio examples that will follow, but it's quite possible your stock EQ in your DAW also has a mid-side functions. These two just make it so easy to visually explain what I'm talking about. So mid-side is simply the process of splitting a stereo waveform into two channels, the mid and side signals. Mid-side EQ is simply applying EQ to those different channels. I think the best way to learn this is just to get straight into an example, so let's hear what the mid and side signals of this mix sounds like. So this mid channel is exactly the same as a mono sum of both channels. It's the left and right. So this side channel sounds very spatial, but it's not simply the panned stuff that's left and right. It's actually a sum of the left channel minus the right channel. And I go into this a little bit more in my mid-side recording tutorial, but take a listen to it. It's very spatial and wide. This feature is on a different place on every EQ. On Ozone, you go to the top here and you just change from stereo to mid-side. It handles that mid-side split for you, and then both the mid and the side get their own EQ display that you can balance out like this. So two different sets of EQ. On FabFilter, it's a bit different. All of the bands are shown on the same screen, and you select mid or side on the band type down here. Now let's get into some practical examples. There's just so many ways to use this technique, but let's start with a production example. Often people will work with samples or with synthesizers and presets where the stereo balance is not the way you'd want it to be. Sometimes it's perfect, but sometimes it's not. So take a listen to this sample, for instance. So it sounds good, but there's two things I'd like to change. The bass is very wide and definitely surrounds the listener, but for this I'd like to have a much more narrow and centered bass that's more focused. And then I'd also like to address some of the resonance in this lead, but we'll get to that in a moment. So the first thing to do is to put this into mid-side mode. I'm going to go straight to the side channels and solo in on those. You can hear all this bass, which I'm going to roll off with a high-pass filter. Now the side channels just have that ambience and much less bass. Let's take this out of solo and hear everything together. And before. So the bass is very wide. And now it's very focused. The next thing I'd like to address is that lead sound. I can't separate the channels out. I don't have the lead anymore, but it sounds very resonant, and I'd like to just tame that a little bit. It's not quite how I'd like it to be. So let's take a listen. If I solo in on the mid channel and the side, I can hear that the lead is mostly on the mid channel. So let's go into there, and let's just simply reduce those a little bit. Make them a little bit more bearable. And then let's go back to the side channel. Just boost a little bit more of that top end. There's not much going on there actually. And while I'm listening to this, there's also a lot of sort of swirliness going on in that mid channel as well. Let's deal with some of that. Yeah, that's much better. So let's do a quick before and after, and you'll hear how much more focused the sound becomes. You may prefer before or after, and it's just a matter of preference. I think when you want to make big changes like this, it would be better to try and go back to those original tracks, but sometimes you're just left with a sample or a preset, and there is no access to the original bass, lead, ambience, and this can be a great way to clean things up and create either more space or less space between those layers depending on how you use it. So let's get on to the next example, a bit more of a mix situation. We'll be using Pro Q3 now, and you can access the mid-side control down here. Make sure it's in mid-side mode, and it's this outer dial here. I just wanted to quickly show you that removing bass from the side channels is not what you want to do every time. Take a listen to this mix. You'll actually hear there's a stereo kick drum, and I go to the sides, which is quite unusual, but it really works in this song. That's the mid. And the sides. So I just don't want anyone to get the wrong impression that you always want to remove bass from the side channels. In this particular arrangement, it actually created a wonderful space for the vocal, and it worked really well. So on to the full example now. Let's take a listen. Let's take a listen just to the mid. So we got that strong bass, and we got the guitars, and the sides. Mostly ambience. And the issue I was having with this song was that if I go back to the stereo mix, the guitars are quite squeaky and scratchy. They sound kind of cute, kind of pop, but it's just a little bit too much brightness. And when I use a stereo EQ to reduce this, the whole mix becomes mushy. It's too heavy-handed during the mastering process. Take a listen. Even if I do a small cut, it's just not working. It either just sounds too mushy or it's not doing enough. So instead of applying EQ to the whole stereo mix, I'm just going to find out where the problem is and fix only that issue. Let's start with the sides. There's no excessive brightness here. Sounds really nice, a lot of ambience, lots of reverb. Let's go to the mid. And it's clear that all of the guitar is focused here. All of those squeaks and scratches. So if I go back to the stereo mix, what I can do is just create a band, focus it in on the mid, take a listen, and sort of hone in on those frequencies. Let's just say it's here. Let's take away 3 or 4 dB. That's quite a lot in mastering, but just so you can really hear this example. Now if I turn the EQ on and off, what I could actually do now is create another band. I can go into the sides, and I could actually boost the same there. Let's turn this on and off. So I tried to make that example quite obvious so that you could hear it. I'm probably pushing a few more dB than I'd want to do at this part of the process. But what we managed to do was control the guitar without dampening all those reverbs. We can just go in and fix one problem, and that's where you'll find the real power of mid-side EQ and mid-side processing comes in. Although my examples are quite dramatic to try and let you hear what this sounds like through YouTube, the real power of this is that you can do a lot less. You don't have to apply lots of EQ to the whole spectrum, stereo, left, right. You can just hone in on the problem and tame it there so that you can leave the rest of the signal untouched. And you'll find that a lot of the mixing and mastering process is not about the effects you do apply, it's about what you can preserve and what you can leave alone while still getting the results that you want. And I want to leave you with something you could try on your own mixes or the stems you're working with, and that is that a lot of people recommend doing a high boost to try and add more width. But I've also found something that works really well for me, or has been working well, if I play this around. The high end on the side channels can create a feeling of width, but I find that if you pull it back into the mid-range or upper mid-range, I find that working in this region, if you can do a subtle boost there on the sides, I find that that actually creates a lot more depth. If you can get some depth in that mid-range, that's where things really start coming alive in a mix. So definitely try that, and let me know if it sounds good to you. So that's everything for today. I do hope you have fun applying this technique to your own productions and mixes. As always, let me know what sort of videos you'd like to see next in the comment section down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.